Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today I want to talk about 7 classic authors whose work I want to explore further. This is kind of a follow-up, kind of a part 2 to a video I did back in, I think March, earlier this year anyway. And that first video was called Classic Authors I Want to Read. And in that video I spoke about some classic authors who I hadn't read before. This video is going to be about classic authors who I have read a little bit. So authors where I've read one of their books and want to read more. So there is a little bit of overlap between this video and the first video because some of the authors I mentioned in the first video I have since read one of their works and that's impressed me so much that I want to read more. So let's get started straight away with the first author that I want to explore further, and that is Virginia Woolf. I have very recently read her non-fiction essay, A Room of One's Own. I did a separate video about that, which is also linked in the description box. And that impressed me so much that I really want to get into her novels. And I didn't just like the argument of this non-fiction essay, which is about the role of women in the creative arts and also in history in general, and how privilege and education and creativity kind of interlink. It's a fantastic book. Only the second non-fiction book that I've ever given 5 stars to. So I really want to get into her novels, and the novel that I recently acquired of hers is one of her early novels, which is called Night and Day. Now, the reason I picked that specific novel to read next is because I'm also doing a project this year where I read 4 books from 4 centuries, starting from 1719 all the way up to 2019. And Night and Day is the Virginia Woolf novel that was published in 1919. So that fits in with that project, which is why I picked up this book. I say I picked it up, I downloaded it for free from Amazon onto my Kindle. Links to all the books, by the way, also in the description box. Just look at the description box, there'll probably be timestamps as well this time. Now, Virginia Woolf is, it's a difficult word to say. Virginia Woolf's more popular novels that I've heard of include To the Lighthouse, Mrs. Dalloway and Orlando, and I'm also planning to read at least one of those at some point. So if you have a favourite Virginia Woolf novel, please tell me in the comments so I know which book to pick up next. But first up, from the Virginia Woolf opus is her early novel Night and Day. Let's get to the next author whose work I want to explore further, and there is a lot of work to explore here because I'm talking about Charles Dickens, and he was famously prolific. I don't know how many novels he's written, but it's a lot. It'll probably keep me busy for a while. Last year, during Victober, in fact, I read Oliver Twist, and that's the first Charles Dickens I've ever read. And I haven't picked up a second Charles Dickens since. But obviously there are so many really famous novels that he's written. Great Expectations, Bleak House. I really don't know where to start with him. So I haven't actually picked my next Charles Dickens novel yet, but it's probably going to be another one of the big hits or another one of the famous. Maybe I'll pick up Great Expectations. I've heard so much good stuff about that book. Anyway, what I enjoyed about Oliver Twist was the writing style mainly. The book really flowed very easily. It was just pleasant to read, and sometimes with classics you have to put a bit of work into them. You have to really focus and concentrate and try and understand the book. But with Oliver Twist, I found that the book was very easy to read and you kind of get absorbed into the story so that you don't even notice that you're reading a book that's, over 100 years old. My next entry on this list is a little bit cheeky because this author has only written 2 novels and I have read one of them. And I'm talking about my favourite Bronte, Anne. Last year, also during Victober, I read The Tenant of Wildfell Hall and I fell in love with this book. I cannot shut up about it. This is a diary style novel / epistolary novel. It kind of switches between different forms of writing, and it is about a woman with a mysterious past, but it is nowhere near as cliche as my description of it makes it sound. It's a wonderfully modern novel that still hits all of the Victorian buttons. So I am very excited to read Agnes Grey, her other novel, and hopefully love it just as much. I have heard that Agnes Grey is very different to The Tenant of Wildfell Hall in feel, and from what I understand, people either love one or the other, but never both of them. So I'm slightly nervous about reading Agnes Grey, but after reading The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, I can't not read Agnes Grey as well. Let's move on to another recent discovery of mine, and this is George Orwell. I read his possibly most famous novel, 1984, earlier this year, and again it hit me right in the everywhere the book is meant to hit you, basically. It's a mid-century dystopian novel, and that is a subgenre I enjoy very much anyway. But the way that it was written, I feel, just had such an impact. He really takes his time with the telling of the story. It's not just a dystopian plot set in a dystopian world, but it is a dystopian plot set in a dystopian world described in a very direct and raw and immersive way. And I know that the pace of the book is the reason why a lot of people don't enjoy it, because they feel like it's too slow. But that's exactly my thing. I want to feel like I know everything about the world that I'm reading about. I want to have the space to truly immerse myself in a world, especially if it is a dark, dystopian future, hopefully not to become reality. So if this is a feature that carries through his other writing, then I really want to explore that like a lot. I know he wrote Animal Farm as another kind of dystopian. Well, that one I believe is always called a parable, you know, like an allegory. Now, my next author is actually someone whose first book I didn't enjoy, and only because of her reputation am I willing to give her another go, and I am talking about Agatha Christie. I am sorry, I know there are so many fans of Agatha Christie. I read Murder on the Orient Express and I did not enjoy it. Without going into too much detail, it was a bit unconvincing, and I also didn't like how it felt more like, you know, a straight up riddle than a story. I read books because I want stories. If I want riddles, I watch BBC quiz shows on a weekday afternoon. But I have been assured that Murder on the Orient Express was definitely the wrong book for a Agatha Christie beginner. So I'm asking you, Agatha Christie fans who might be watching, which novel should I have started with? Which Agatha Christie book? And I don't care whether it's like a Poirot series or whatever. I don't care which series this is from. Which Agatha Christie book is the perfect beginner read? Because I want to give her a second chance, I really do. But I was not impressed with Murder on the Orient Express. And if my second read of hers is also a disappointment, then I'll probably just give up on her, and that will be very sad. We remain firmly in the 20th century for my next author, who I want to explore further. Wonder how many times I can say that within the confines of this video. And the next author on this list is John Wyndham. I read The Day of the Triffids last year or the year before that, and I loved it. I've already mentioned that 20th century dystopian fiction is one of my favourite subgenres, and The Day of the Triffids is so gloriously mid-century. You know, it's got weird scientific experiments gone wrong, it's got the overshadowing threat of the Cold War, it's got some flipping around of gender roles and societal norms, and it's a very British kind of dystopian novel, which I also enjoy. So I really want to read some of his other fiction. From what I understand, he firmly remains within the genre of dystopian worlds and futuristic fiction and things like that. So I'm just going to pick up more John Wyndham novels as I come across them. I've heard The Chrysalids is also a very good one. So I'll keep an eye out for that in the charity shop. I feel like he is a slightly underrated author, maybe a slightly underread author, and someone who I really want to explore more. I hope his other works are as fun / terrifying as The Day of the Triffids is, which, by the way, I'm sorry, this is really chaotic. I didn't summarize The Day of the Triffids. It's basically killer plants taking over London, also everyone's blind. What a setup. And the final author I want to talk about today is BookTube's darling, Daphne du Maurier. A couple of years ago, or maybe last year, I honestly cannot remember, I read Rebecca because everyone on BookTube told me to read it. And also because I was getting a little bit fed up of having to fast forward through BookTube videos that spoke about Rebecca so I wouldn't accidentally get spoiled. So I read the book, I actually recorded my reaction of reading the book, link in the description box if you want to watch me read Rebecca. And I really enjoyed it. It was pretty much exactly as I expected. It was dark, it was moody, it was slow, character-driven. Fiction. Lovely. What more could I want? So after I read Rebecca, I just started picking up Daphne du Maurier books every time I saw one. And let me tell you something, British charity shops are full of Daphne du Maurier. Let me just see which ones I can find on my TBR. So these are the ones that are actually in its place. I've got Jamaica Inn and My Cousin Rachel, but I'm pretty sure I've got at least one other one of hers somewhere in the piles of books that are behind me where you can't see them. So Daphne du Maurier, with Rebecca, I already got the feeling that she's best read in autumn, she's best read in winter, when it's cold and gloomy and dark, and you think that the ghost of a forgotten past might be figuratively haunting your house, and I want that feeling again, so I can't wait to dive into her work once it gets a bit more gloomy and chilly in here. So those were my 7, was it actually 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So those were my 7 classic authors whose work I want to explore further. Please hit me with all of your recommendations in the comments and tell me which classic authors do you feel like you haven't quite explored yet. Maybe there's one specific classic that you've read and you've loved but you haven't yet explored the author's other works. If so, let me know down below. Thank you for watching. Bye!